Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. You are here live with us for Our Dream, Our Progress, which is a conversation on politics and action. I would just want to first take out this time to say thank you for everyone who is here attending, to our panelists. I appreciate you guys for accepting the invite to join us on this much needed conversation. Of course, I want to send my gratitude to the Fort Worth Tarrant County chapter of NAACP, the Arlington NAACP chapter, as well as the Texas State Youth and College Division of NAACP for helping us when it came to promotion and making sure that we got this event out to the individuals needed. Would also like to say thank you to WFAA, ABC Dallas Fort Worth affiliate, for helping us when it came to media pushing on the news as well as on their website. I would also like to recognize two elected officials that we have with us as of now. Fort Worth City Councilwoman Gina Bivens, as well as Fort Worth City Councilwoman Kelly Allen Gray. And I appreciate you guys for joining in on this much needed conversation and just for your support throughout the planning process of the event. Just a little bit about this event and kind of why I decided to put this on. Um, of course, we just went through a very an interesting election cycle with the 2020 election. And of course, we have a new president that'll be a new president and vice president that'll be inaugurated on Wednesday. And there's just a lot that's going on in the political scene. Of course, here in Texas, we have several municipal elections that are happening in May. And then our state legislature just went back into session. So there's a lot going on when it comes to politics. And so I will just say, this conversation is really to help mobilize and build on the progress that we had back in November for that past election cycle. We saw so many people come out, not just here in Fort Worth, but all across the state and all across the country, come out to the polls to elect a new president, but to do and make some change across um, across their respective municipal governments. In addition to that, of course, one of the main issues that we saw, and I think everybody on the panel can kind of talk about this, one of the main issues that we saw is a lot of people come in to the polls and they weren't really going in as an informed voter. They were voting for, of course, the president. They may have knew someone as far as congressional who they wanted to vote for. However, they didn't learn and know more about those local officials who really have that more so direct impact to the policies and things that affects them. And so this conversation today is really just for us to talk about some voter engagement strategies, advocacy, and how does that look and how is that modeled. We'll talk about engagement with our elected officials, as well as going into and talking about more so, how do we activate college students and young adults? Because that's a huge demographic here across the country. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the conversation. And so the first main topic that I really want us to focus in on is engagement with elected officials. And so, like I said in the introduction, here in Texas, we have our state legislature that went into session. We have municipal governments and municipal elections that are coming up. And so I want to point this first question to actually, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I would like to, yeah, I'm going. I would like to actually, before we do that, I would like each of the panelists, if they could, just to kind of quickly introduce themselves and just kind of give some highlights about themselves. So we will start with Shevann.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shevann Steuben. I proudly serve as the president of the Youth and College Division for the state of Texas. Well, NAACP Youth and College Division, let me go ahead and get that correct. I'm an alumna of Baylor University from the spring of 20, so the first COVID class is what I would like to say. And I'm a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated as well.
Thank you so much. Sean, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Kendall. My name is Sean Reed, and I currently serve as the Equity Officer for the Dallas-Fort Worth Urban League Young Professionals, in addition to the co-leader of the Our Voice Voter Coalition in North Texas, and a few of the board positions. And I'm just excited to be here today to talk to you guys about this important topic.
Thank you. Channing, could you introduce yourself for us?
Hi, my name is Channing Hill. I'm a sophomore strategic legal and management communications major at Howard University. Um, I started off in the Arlington, Texas NAACP Youth Council. I now am the press and publicity chair for the Howard University college unit. I am an activist. I am a organizer in the area, and I'm just really glad to be here for this conversation.
Thank you, Channing. Traelon, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon. First of all, thanks for the invitation, Kendall. My name is Traelon Rodgers. I am a third year student at Dillard University, Urban Studies and Public Policy major from Dallas, Texas. I currently serve on the National Board of Directors for the NAACP. I serve as the Executive Director for the Next Generation Action Network. And I also serve as the SGA President at Dillard University. Um, I think that's all relevant information, but I'm just glad to be here.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Rick, could you introduce yourself for us?
Thank you, Kendall. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rick Hart. I am a junior political science major, sociology minor at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. I recently served as the Young Georgians engagement coordinator for Senator-elect Reverend Raphael Warnock's campaign for the United States Senate. And I also serve as president of the Morehouse College Collegiate Chapter of National Action Network. Thank you, Kendall, for bringing me on and inviting me to speak with you all this afternoon.
Thank you, sir. And just so you guys can know who I am, of course, my name is Kendyll Locke, and I am a junior political science major at the University of North Texas, where I'll graduate in December. In addition to that, I hold numerous positions in different organizations across the state and here in Tarrant County, including the Fort Worth Tarrant County branch of NAACP. So we will go ahead and get started with our conversation today. And the first topic that I really want us to kind of hone in on is engagement with our elected officials. And so I'll point this question to you, Sean. So with everything that's going on, how should we engage with our elected officials, whether that's at the local level, state level, or even the national level? And what can we do to hold them accountable?
Thank you, Kendall. I think it's always important for people, especially young people, to engage with elected officials, especially if you're an active voter. So I think the way that you engage is strategically and boldly. I think the first thing you need to figure out is what's your purpose of contacting that elected official? What problems do you already see that they can possibly have a solution to, and how you see yourself in that solution? So I'll give you two examples of some engagements I've had on state level and the city level. And then hopefully it can help inspire some of the people on the call today to do the same in their municipalities and things. So for city council, you have to know what power each elected office has the authority to change. So city council basically controls the budget of a city and a bunch of different city departments. So my city council person is Councilman Casey Thomas. And back in 2015, I did the research to figure out who my council person was, where he stood on certain issues, and then those issues that were important to me, I expressed interest and told him these are what's important to me. I want to be a part of a solution. These are some problems or some inconsistencies that I see with things going on at City Hall. How can I help you help my community? And a lot of times, elected officials are looking for people to be experts or to really engage in certain activities because they can't be everywhere in all times. So he was happy to connect me with people doing work and those things that I brought up to him. And since that time in 2015, I've worked on his campaign every election campaign, and I've been appointed to city boards and commissions, including the 2020 census complete count committee, which I think is the most important board and commission on the city council level. And we've been doing great work together. For, I guess, the state level, I have a relationship with State Senator Royce West, and I wanted to learn more about policy. So for this, I took a different approach. I said, just graduating college, I've been organizing in this space, but how do I kind of convert this organizing and this action to policy work? And he said, I have an annual conference called the African American ALLC, Leadership Institute, and it was at Paul Quinn College. And he said, let's start by going here and listening to experts and listening to what's being done on both local and state levels. And then let's come to the planning meetings to see how you can fit into what's already been done. And then from there, we start having, subcommittees and things of that nature and start to do policy work on the state level. But I think it takes you knowing what you want to change, you building a relationship with that elected official and making an ask, and just being consistent. Whatever you want to do won't happen overnight or within the day. And a lot of times, whatever the first meeting is, you're not going to solve something, but you have to consistently show up and figure out what attributes and contributions you can bring to the cause. And Kendall, can you hear me loudly? I was having some audio issues. I'm not sure. Want to make sure.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can hear you perfectly fine. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And I think that's a great point. I think oftentimes us as individuals, when we, have an issue, a hot topic, to say the least, we're quick to just go contact, our state rep about an issue that's done on the city level, and that's vice versa. So I think it's all about, of course, us being informed and having that information on which level affects us in the different ways it does that. Traelon, do you have anything that you want to add to that question?
Could you just ask the question one more time?
Sure. So how should we engage with our elected officials? And that's on all levels, whether that's the local level, state level, national level, and then more so, how do we hold them accountable with the different things that's going on in their respective representative areas?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I didn't mention earlier, but since Shevann said, I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, the greatest fraternity known to mankind. But I think the way that we hold the most important thing is to hold them accountable. So once you get it's easy for you to say, can you do X, Y, Z, and for them to say yes. I mean, that's simple. That's their job, or for them to be evasive and answer the question. But I think the way that you hold them accountable is by being present. They can't dodge you if you're always there. So when I was in high school, I graduated from Townview, from the Law Magnet in Dallas. I was always at the school board meetings, no matter what it was about. And my school board member, who's no longer is no longer on the school board, Lou Blackburn, got tired of me. He was so tired of me, by the time I graduated, he gave me a hug when I walked off the stage. So I think what we have to do is find the area that you want to target, and find the issue, and then find people who can relate to that issue, because there's power in numbers. Like if one person can say that they smell mold or that they see mold in the school, but if the entire school comes and say they see mold in the school, you can get that fixed. Or so in New Orleans, they have the worst potholes you can ever want to find anywhere in America. My tire being busted may be one thing, but if I get, people from a certain community to address the issue, then that's when they start to listen more. And then once you get their ear and get the confirmation, you want to hold them accountable by making sure that you follow up. And sometimes, like Sean said, they are looking for people who can have those solutions, because they aren't experts on everything. Some people have strong suits in certain areas and they're weak in others. And I think any elected official who says that they're strong in anything is one that doesn't need to be in office anymore. But if you can help them to find target areas, and it's your expertise, just make sure you help them out. And I think a lot of them welcome that, and just keep the heat on them is the only thing that I would say, other than what Sean said. I think everything that he said was great. Know who you represent, who represents you. Sorry, my councilman is Casey Thomas also. So know who represents you, know what they represent you for, and know how they can help you and what your relationship from them can be. And the relationship shouldn't be transactional. What Sean talked about was not just a transactional relationship. He doesn't call Casey every time he needs something. He said he's helped him on his campaign. There are ways to engage aside from just asking for something. So just don't make the relationship transactional. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've gotten from being. These are people. These are humans who are in an oftentimes thankless job. So if you can help them, not by necessarily paying them, but giving them some volunteer time or do whatever you can do for them, they'll appreciate it. And not saying you're doing it to get something, but it does go a long way.
Kendyll, can I add one more thing?
For sure.
I think Traelon said a lot of good points, but I did want to bring up one more thing about accountability, because I don't think I spoke a lot about accountability. And I think the first thing, as we try to hold elected officials accountable, is being present at city council meetings and school board meetings. Like we have to check the record. We can't always look and see what was said on Facebook or say, oh, they campaigned on this, so they're automatically doing this. I think a lot of time we have high engagement with, voter turnout sometimes, but then how much engagement do we have at the city council meetings or at the school board meetings, on and so forth. And sometimes we take others' word for I guess law and say, okay, this organization, this person said this person's doing this, so I automatically believe that they're doing so. And that's not always the case. And all these meetings are always recorded. You can always go back and listen. There's always like a transcript on who said what. So before you even go to the elected official and you have an issue, make sure that you actually have an issue and something to hold them accountable for. So go back and listen to that city council, that school board meeting, go back and listen to that briefing and see what they had to say on that particular issue, and ask yourself, does this align with their platform? Does it align with the people who exist within their community? Because you won't always have, the opportunity to have strong relationships with elected officials. Sometimes it may be the opposite person who you wanted to win that seat, right? But we still have to hold them accountable because of the people who live in the community and the people that they represent. And the only way to do that is to pay attention to how they're voting on the issues that are most important to you.
Thank you for that, Sean. I think that's super important. And I think that's something that we don't see a lot of from a lot of people in the community, especially when we have hot topics and things, even thinking about this past summer with the incident with George Floyd and just other injustices that we saw across our respective communities. Oftentimes you see, organizations, they start up, they protest with the hot spots. And then, when it's on an off year or there's no election, or if people aren't, talking about that particular situation in the news, they're dead. You can't hear them, you don't see them, they're not visible, they're not present. And so I think those are all key components that we need to make sure that we, we remember and we take with us when wanting to kind of create our change within our communities. Before I get to the next question, I just want to remind everybody to please feel free to ask questions as we're going throughout the panel discussion. We do have time set aside for Q&A, and we'll get to your questions. So please feel free to ask those questions in the chat. So this next question is for you, Rick, because I know that you've been doing a lot of work in Georgia this past election cycle, and I know it has been busy for you. But even with some of the things that you're doing there at Morehouse with National Action Network and just all the other organizations you are a part of. So what are some strategies that can be implemented to gain more engagement from voters? And so that's one part of the question, but taking it a step higher, in particular, what can be done when it comes to young adults and college students and people, like us?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Kendyll. And the first thing I'd say is look in your own network, right? So when you're looking for people to go out and vote, or you're looking for people to accompany you to protest, or whatever initiative action within the community that it might be, start within your own community. You might realize in your own network, you might realize that your cousin may not be an active voter. You might realize somebody you graduated from high school may not be an active voter. You might realize that your next door neighbor, and so on and so forth, is not an active voter, is not somebody that is engaged, but cares about the issues. Start there and then build upon those networks is one thing that we did in Georgia, I think, very effectively. Again, the old saying, tell your friend to tell a friend, get your neighbor to tell their neighbor tell everybody in your community, in your church, your sister, your brother, X, Y, and Z. That really does go a long way at the end of the day in generating votes and generating involvement and generating, the power and momentum needed to sustain a movement, whether it be on the ballot or in the community going forward. And then the other thing I'd say is to go into communities, go to where people are. To talk to young voters, we found ourselves on Twitch, we found ourselves on YouTube. We were doing some things that typically hadn't been done in election cycles with the Warnock campaign and even the Biden campaign prior to that. Because if you don't go to voters, if you don't go to where they are in their own communities, you're not doing an effective job at outreach at the end of the day. So again, just going to where the voters are, especially young people, is a way in which allows you to speak effectively in a certain platform and generates momentum to win a movement, to win the presidential race in Georgia, as we saw, to win the runoff race. And hopefully that continues going into 2022 and beyond.
Thank you for that. I think that's important, meeting individuals where they are in the community. That's definitely a key takeaway. Shevann, I want to ask you the same question. So once again, what are some strategies that can be implemented to gain more engagement from voters? And then too, if you have anything that you guys have been doing with the Youth and College Division of Texas NAACP, just as a branch, feel free to share that as well.
Yeah, so I might answer that question a little backwards, but it'll all come together. But I think in terms of engagement activation, one thing we try to do on the state level is communicating with our units. So all of our youth councils, all of our college chapters, to make sure that they have voter registration drives, that they have, whether it's, I know some of our units will call it different things, but they have a march to the polls, or they have a bus to the polls, carpools, and so forth. So it's what Rick is saying about meeting people where they are, where physically where people are. But once you get those people, how do you continue to engage them? Because it's not enough to get people to register. I think that's something that we noticed in this election cycle. We've been focusing on voter registration a lot. It's great if you have 1 million people registered, but if you only have 20,000 people that actually go and cast their ballot, that doesn't make a difference. And so how do you continue to engage those people? And so I think we are in a generation, our specific generation of young people, where I like to call it the participation trophy generation, where like we want people to give us pizza and t-shirts and all these things. And for some people, they might think, wow, like you shouldn't have to tell people that they're gonna get a prize to do that. But if that's gonna get them to go cast their ballot, I'm gonna give you a t-shirt. I'm gonna give you some pizza. I'm gonna give you a gift card. I'm gonna find some money to figure out how to get you to where we need to be. And so a lot of what I think helps with engagement, to answer your first question, is meeting people where they are mindset wise. If I know that you're only interested in education, then I need to tell you about everything that's on the ballot education wise and how those are intertwined. One thing that we tried to do, and it's a growing thing in terms of, we just didn't have enough time. The election moved quickly, but educating people on every part of the system. How does this specific position within our government affect these things? So even when you think about like your grocery stores, who does that actually come down to? Yeah, it might be city council, then it is someone statewide, it is someone federally, it all has a pipeline. And so how do you make sure that people understand that there are connected issues, that why they have to vote down the ballot? And so connecting them to those issues that they care about. And then I always stress this is like the intergenerational organizing part of it. There are young people, there are seasoned people, we don't call them old people, seasoned. There are seasoned people that, they have a lot of resources. They are a great resource. They are elders, and they have a lot that they can offer us. But if you put them in front of somebody who looks like us, they may not be able to stress those points. So making sure that you're also teaming up with them. They might have the strategy, they might have the timeline, they might know what the best practices are, but you may be the best vessel. So making sure you're getting all the right materials together, the right people together, the right resources to be able to not only activate, but continually engage.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Channing, I want to ask you a question because you have kind of done something or have kind of been out on the field when it comes to advocating in the community, protesting, but you've been doing it on a consistent basis, not just here in Arlington, but just across the DFW area, across the state, and then of course there in Howard. So what are some suggestions that you can kind of share with us when it comes to advocacy, how that's modeled, and how can individuals tap into advocacy and what that really looks like?
I was not expecting that question, but it kind of goes into what Shevann says and what people have been saying throughout the question. You have to meet people where they are. So much of advocacy and so much of getting people involved and out and really doing the work, you have to understand you have to make them understand how it affects them. So when I'm in my school district and I'm at Howard, and I have students who may feel like some of the issues in the DC community doesn't affect them on campus at Howard, or some of the teachers in the school district do not see how the behavioral issues, the social issues that the students face in our school district have anything to do with their classroom. You have to approach them in a different way that you may have had to have approached me, or you may have had to approach Traelon. So it's about adjusting and being flexible, but also being consistent. So when we have an event, it's very important to capitalize off of the engagement that we got at this event. So when I have a protest, the people at the protest are not leaving the protest without signing in, without registering, so we can keep them involved and updated with not only what's going on in the community, but what we're going to do to change it. You want to make people feel like they're a big part of the solution. A lot of people distance themselves and say, well, Channing's doing the work, so I don't have to, or my vote doesn't matter. You have to make them understand that they are the part of the solution. That solution does not come without unity. Solution does not come without all of us working together to make a difference, to see the change. And on top of that, when it comes to making sure that it's felt across all demographics, across everybody who was a part of the organizing, you want to take joy, you want to celebrate, if that makes sense. Like, we worked so very hard to put on multiple protests. We worked hard in the background to make sure that voices were being heard at student council meetings, at city hall meetings, at school board meetings. And sometimes those can feel defeated. Those can feel defeating. You're not going to be able to feel the fruit of your labor if you don't take a moment to feel the joy, to celebrate what you've done and celebrate, the wins. And that's equally as important as getting out there in the first place.
Thank you, Channing. Does anybody else want to add to that question before I move on? Okay. Sean, so of course I know that in addition to you doing work with different organizations, of course you are a campaign strategist. You work with different campaigns, and you connect a lot of individuals in the community, especially younger people, to different campaigns to do the work in a sense. And so one of the recurring questions that I constantly got while people were going in and registering was, how about if they're not vocal, if they don't want to be out in the public in the spotlight, but they still want to have somewhat of an impact, whether that's on a campaign, or whether that's out in the community. And so I'll just kind of pause and allow you to just add any, or offer any strategies, or anything you can as to those individuals that may not want to be on the front lines, but they still want to have an impact in the work that's being done.
Thank you, Kendyll. And just so I understand, your question is basically how do you engage people who are I don't want to say new, but new to election work? Like, what's the first entry point if they don't want to be on the front lines and really leading something?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So I think the first thing, and I saw somebody's question like in the chat, so I'll try to, answer that and answering this at the same time. Um, I think you have to be consistent. And before I start, I forgot to mention during my bio. So from January up until November, I worked as a voter expansion director for the Texas Democratic Party through the DCCC, the Congressional Campaign Committee of the Democratic Party. And my whole job was to increase voter expansion. And where I targeted were apartment complexes. And I was told that in Texas and Dallas, sorry, dog. We don't go to apartment complexes. Those are communities, you don't go to because one, it's trespassing, two, they don't have high voter turnout. So I said, it's not trespassing if you ask. So just ask if you can go. And if they say no, you leave and you go back when they're not there. But anyway, I think the first thing is being consistent and showing up in communities, even when elections aren't happening. So you can, build a following and show people that you're really about the community and what change and what's happening within that community. And then you have conversations with people. So I'm the king of one-on-ones and, conversations. I really like to figure out what people want and what they want out of things and how I can help them get what they want. And so I can get a win too. So having a conversation and figuring out, what angle can I approach this from? How can this be beneficial for them and also beneficial for me? I think that's very important. I think a lot of times campaign workers and people who are, doing this election work, they're so used to going, is that their mind is always racing and they don't slow down enough to really listen to what the volunteers or what the people want. And I think if we take time to do that, we can think of things that can be targeted towards those people. There's all sorts of things that you can do on a campaign, from collecting signatures, from having people to share things on social media. Like I even had people, I said, look, you don't have to do anything else, but when we make a post, if you agree with it, can you tag some people? Can you like this? Can you boost up the impressions, things of that nature? So listing out everything that's possible for people to do and saying no job is too small. We need people passing out flyers. We need people door knocking. We need people phone banking. We need people text banking. We need people just sharing things on social media. And then if nothing else, host small, get your family members, get your friends together, have the necessary needed conversations with your own network and your own community. And you just be a voice for our campaign, or you be a voice for our elected official in your sphere of influence. And I think that that's important to show up in communities all year round. And then two, to, really understand and ask the question, what do you want? What do you want to do? What are you good at? How can I use your strengths the best of our ability to do some good work and stuff, and just really being flexible with that, what that answer looks like. So for me, it's a simple answer, but hopefully I answered that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. For this next question, I want to ask, or I want to point it to Traelon and Rick, because you guys are still in college. And I'm pretty sure you guys can give some good insight as to this question, or for this next question. So why is it important for young adults, and when I say young adults, more in particularly college students, to be engaged, but not just our typical, signs of engagement where we're out and we're attending a protest or we're liking and sharing something on social media. Why is it important for us to be informed when we go in to vote? Why is it important for us to, possibly pair up with or team up with a campaign? What's the importance behind that for us as college students? And I'll start with Traelon.
Yeah, I think the most important, it's important because as we see in places like Prairie View, uh, those students can change entirely the county. I mean, Waller County has been changed because of Prairie View A&M. They have their students on the city council. Recently, commissioner elected. I mean, the mayor, Brian Rowland. I mean, we see in places like that, they're changing the trajectory of politics based off of a university. And it's not because they're going out to vote. but it's because they're looking at issues and they're realizing how people who say they're representing them don't actually represent their beliefs or what they're doing. And so it's important because when we look at, Frederick Douglass said it's easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. And so what we're doing here in our universities and colleges respectively is that we're building strong children in a sense, so that we don't have to worry about years later having to talk to broken men about why Black Lives Matter, or why we deserve to live or why we deserve certain freedoms. So they've been civically engaged because privatization of public schools is taking children out. School to prison pipeline is something. We're the generation right above grade school and high school. So what we're seeing is that these issues are in fact affecting the children who are the future of tomorrow. So if we don't engage, if we aren't civically engaged, we'll be the gatekeeper of the future of HBCUs, of MSIs, and we'll let them go, and we'll just watch them fade away. And so it's important for us to be focused and to pay attention, because it's up to us to make sure that there is something left for the generation that comes behind us, because our seats are leased and they're rented. And once we give up our seat, it needs to be in a good condition, or a better condition than you found it when somebody leased it to you. So it's important for us to engage in our politicians, to vote, to know what's on the ballot, and to just pay attention to what's going on in our community, because the grassroots organizing is the most important and most powerful thing that we can have as a group of young people, because we have the numbers and we have the ability to do it.
Yeah, someone said to me very recently, kind of to Traelon's point, that young people are the leaders of not just tomorrow, but also the leaders of today. And in that, we hold a distinct responsibility to keep our foot on the gas to ensure that we're electing fierce progressive advocates for a healthy, equitable, and just future for all of us. We have to continue this movement that we've seen over the course of this last year, going into the future, to ensure that there is equitable access to healthcare, to ensure that there are infrastructure improvements all around our country, especially in Black and Brown communities, to ensure that we are working to mitigate the effects of climate change going forward. There's so many different issues that us as young people care so dearly about, that we have to continue, ensure that the momentum continues to work on behalf of, to afflict some positive change that'll not just benefit us going forward, but the generations that come after us, just like Traelon said.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Shevann, do you have anything that you want to add for that? Especially I know Rick and Traelon, they come from HBCUs, but with you being at a predominantly white institution, kind of what is your take on that? And how did you see that affect, of course, the student body at large, but then more so, the Black students that were on campus?
Yeah, so I first want to echo what Rick said, because I wholeheartedly agree. And actually, we just themed our year for our executive committee for the state, and it's "We're not next, we're now." So I've been saying that since like the beginning of the pandemic. Like, for instance, all of our panelists today, their positions don't say tomorrow. Like, Traelon's position doesn't say board member tomorrow. It does not say board member next year. It does not say strategist next year for Sean, or so forth. It says it right now. And so I always like stress that to people. This is not a wait and see or wait until someone leaves. It's a right now kind of thing. And so as far as the PWI situation, so I guess I did forget to mention as well, I was president of the Baylor NAACP for 2 years as well. And so there's a lot that kind of goes into that. It's a very small population, less than 6%. It declined every year that I was at Baylor. And there's a lot of spaces. And I will say there's a lot of spaces filled by the same people. And I will say that from my even personal experience. So not only was I president of the Baylor NAACP for 2 years, I was president of the Black Student Coalition for 2 years, which is basically like our underarching umbrella for all student organizations, mostly called like BSU at most schools. You have about maybe 30% of the people you see every single day, maybe upwards to 50, that are all in Greek life. So there's a lot of doubling that happens. And so when it comes to pushing the importance of power and people power, it was really hard because I know there was one situation we had with a Panhellenic sorority, and it took a lot to get the importance of the situation. Like, y'all are walking around saying the N word, and it's not okay. And it took a lot for us to even say to our school, hey, there needs to be consequences for this. And we even went to speak to their sorority, and it was a lot to unpack. And so at a PWI, I think it just becomes a lot more difficult to find allies, because you have to find allies because there's not very many of you. And then finding those that are truly committed to that partnership. So even one thing that we wanted to do was have election day be like a school holiday. And so my biggest argument was, y'all will cancel school for a football game, but y'all won't cancel school to go vote. And so that was like a really big argument that we had. And I will even say I had with faculty of color on campus about pushback for having election day as a holiday. And so I will say that was also one of the hardest things of, I don't know how to say this like in a nice way, but you have people of color on your campus. We always talk about like all skin folk and kinfolk, and like that's definitely true at a PWI. I love all of the Black faculty and staff that I've met at Baylor, but they are not all on the same page. They're not all on the same wavelength, whether it's generational, whether it's racial, for any of our other minorities, faculty and staff. But it's a lot of pushing the envelope. So a lot of being in their face. I think Traelon gave an example about like somebody giving him a hug earlier after all of the noise that he made. Honestly, they were probably ready to see me go, because my first email as president for Baylor, we had a new president, a new university president, and I probably sent her an email with about, this is the size, right? Imagine 3 of those. And it went down the entire thing. And I remember I just got hired in multicultural affairs. Our director said, yeah, I knew you were going to be a troublemaker. And I said, I just wanted her to know we're not advertisement, we're not puppets. You know, we actually have a place here. You're not going to use us on these magazines, but you're not going to support us. That's just not what's happening. And so at a PWI, it's just a lot more pushback because you're not seeing people that look like you. That's really just it.
Thank you for sharing that. So Tramonica, I see that you were able to join in. For those of you that don't know Tramonica, and I'll let her introduce herself, but I definitely want to say Tramonica, she's been on the front lines with her nonprofit organization, Not My Son, here in Dallas. And they've been really doing some great work when it comes to advocacy, and also just engaging with as well as holding our elected officials accountable here throughout the state. So Tramonica, just kind of want to hear from you as to some different strategies and different methods of advocacy that you can offer to us, in addition to just kind of how you've been using your organization to push that across.
Absolutely. Hi, guys. Hope everybody is enjoying MLK. I am Tramonica Brown. I am the founder of Not My Son. I just want to inspire people and say, for us, especially us being Black people, the best way to engage and really promote advocacy is to meet people where they are. A lot of times going out and networking and just bridging the gap with the community with politics is we're finding that people don't reach out to them and think that they have a realistic vote. And when I say that, I mean, they host these voter registration drives, but they're not hosting them somewhere where they would be. Like Not My Son, we went to Rochester Park. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but that's a huge park with a lot of historic and rich textures to it, but it's in the hood. And a lot of people came and they were excited to know that in the midst of them having fun, we were still out there registering people to vote, educating them that they can vote if they were a convicted felon, and giving them those necessary tools. And as far as our city hall is concerned, we have to keep our knee on their necks to make sure that they're actually providing those real resources and those real changes instead of just talking about it. We have to actually get out there and engage and go to the city council meetings and set up meetings to talk to them, because all of this can be done. So encouraging people to step out there, work hard, work hard, and make sure that we're making sure that our voice is heard, because we are the young people. I heard somebody talking just a second ago. we have so many different organizations around, so many different leaders, and it is the youth. The older generation, they have set a good foundation for us, but we, and I know if y'all can look and see what happened with Georgia, we are creating the real narrative of what's going to drive us for the next 30, 40 years right now. So we have to hold and maintain positions that we have and excel so that way we can build a better future.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. 100%. And I appreciate you for sharing that. Could you share though more so even like with your organization, Not My Son, because that was another question that we received when people was registering was, you know, one, with tapping in with an organization, how does that work as far as pushing advocacy, whether that's through protesting, whether that's through just being tapped in with the organization. But you did something that a lot of people don't do. You actually took the next step of actually establishing an organization and consistently doing the work, because oftentimes I think we do this as individuals. We don't actually band together or and come together to actually push what it is we're trying to push, whether it's our agenda, whatever the case may be. So if you can just speak to kind of what led you to creating that organization and why you actually went ahead and established a nonprofit, you know, for what you established it for. And so yeah.
Absolutely. So, Not My Son started with the wake of George Floyd. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge incident, but I was one of the people on there and actually got to see the city versus protesters in its rawest form. I don't think here in Dallas we've ever seen it in our generation where it was so ugly, where I was hearing our former police chief and some of those other high ranking officials, go to bat and say, well, we shouldn't have marched up there when clearly I was there. They let us on the bridge. So knowing that we didn't have real advocacy, somebody that I felt like I could trust. I felt like I was jumping in front of people's children at 7 o'clock to make sure they didn't get pepper sprayed or they didn't get shot at. I mean, it was very real. So the very next day I said, I'm going to create something to where I know that I will feel responsible and I will know that these kids are going to be safe. Because we're out here and we are marching in the wake, in the dead of the heat. And we really want our voices heard. And so I established Not My Son June 2nd. And I started saying, well, you know what? We're doing all this marching. We need to get some of these city officials and some of these police officers out here to talk to us. By that time, we were marching for probably about 2 to 3 weeks. And so I had the open forum where we had our now Representative-elect Jasmine Crockett, and we had an officer, and we had some other people to attend. I want to say Casey Thomas attended too, who was a city council member. So being able to put all those people in front of protesters and let them answer those raw questions, not strategically placed questions, but raw questions that the people have, opened up a plethora of other opportunities. And I said, well, while we're doing that, hey, we're telling them we want our community back. We need to start doing things actually in our community to center that focus and synergize that energy. So then we developed the 3 pillars of Not My Son, which the first one is social activism, of course. That's us out there fighting for our rights. That's us educating people on what we need and what we should have as a people. And our second one is community outreach, and that's what we do. Feeding the homeless, backpack drives. We have a tutoring program. We did a Thanksgiving give back. Anything that involves community engagement. And then our third one, which ties it all together, is civic engagement, which is one of the most important ones because we're actually able to, with everything that people see us do, we're building trust within those communities. So when we're telling them, hey, let's register to vote, we can really change the tone of our own city. See, what happened at the Capitol was a wake-up call for me. And I hope everybody else received it, because that lets you know that we could be on the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge, but they can storm the Capitol and get treated with more respect. So yes, right here in Dallas, we can change our own narrative right here. So I tell people when we have our meetings, and we invite everybody out, and anything that we do, we always have a moment where we say, you need to join a local organization. We need to pour into here where we live. We live in Dallas, or we live in Fort Worth. Where you stay is where you need to stomp your feet the hardest, because we need to instill change right here where we live. The presidential election, that's great. But we have issues right here that people don't know that affect us the most. So, and I tell people I hadn't told y'all yet, but I am running for city council in District 7. And one of the main things is we need somebody who is new blood. Like I heard somebody talk about earlier, it's us, it's our time, it's the youth time. So having somebody in there that hadn't sat on the cycle for 20 years of knowing this and knowing that, because they, in some ways, in some sorts, they've been a part of it. And we have to get to a point to where we're trying to establish us as a people right now. We're trying to move forward and actually dominate and get people to understand that, hey, these local organizations that do the groundwork, they're pouring into the community. So I definitely want to make sure that anybody who's on here, join a local organization. NAACP, it's plenty, it's so many organizations. I don't know them all, but get into something to where you can stomp your feet and really make that organization work, because they're on the ground. People who are on the ground, who are fighting for our rights, who are trying to pour back into our communities, those are the people that need to be in the forefront, because see, we're doing the work. It's time out for politicians. We need somebody who's going to actually get in there and say, you know what? I'm in it for my people. I need to see this city succeed, and not want to take undercut money from Fair Park or wherever else. We got to get to a point to where development is not the key to our success, because in my district, District 7, it has rich culture. South Dallas, that's the heart of the city. Nobody can deny that. We have to get to a point to where we're bridging that gap and we're truly getting it done.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, Tramonica, for all of that you shared. Especially when you talked about the pillars of your organization. And that's one thing that I just kind of want to let everyone know is, I mean, of course, it's good to, be engaged, but we have to make sure that whenever we're engaging with our community, that we're strategic about it, that we're intentional about it, and that what we're doing is going to be a reflection for the good of our community as a whole. And so I think oftentimes one of the things that I think all of us on the panel can kind of attest to is, we'll often see things on social media. I know I see it on Twitter almost every day about the Black agenda. We don't see our officials pushing the Black agenda, or, this is my agenda for young people. This is my agenda. We hear that word used loosely. And so I think oftentimes we have to kind of reflect back, what is our agenda? What is it that we are, pushing for? What is it that we are striving to, make change and create change for? And so that's just kind of one lasting thought that I want to kind of leave with everybody as we close the panel discussion is, let's think about, what is our purpose when it comes to us getting engaged? What is it that we, want to push? Because of course, I may be passionate about education, but Rick may be passionate about healthcare, and that's vice versa on all issues that we have. And so I just kind of want to challenge everybody to think about what it is that's important to you. And actually, sit down and sculpt together. How does that look? How does that engagement model look? How does that, issue affect you and affect the other people in your community? And then you work from there, because we definitely have to make sure that we aren't just being reactionary, but of course we're being strategic, and we're actually taking the time to make sure that we are, skillfully crafting down our ideas, our platforms, our pillars, and then running with those. So I definitely want to say thank you to everyone that joined our panel. I think this was a much needed discussion. Now I want us to move into questions and answers. I see that there have been numerous people firing off in the chat as well as the Q&A section. And so I will turn to Channing Hill, and she will lead us with our Q&A.
I am just overwhelmed with the power that is coming from this event. I'm grateful that Miss Tracy Scott and you let me on board to help, plan and organize this event. If y'all don't know, Miss Tracy is the founder of Black Women's Political Action Committee in here in Texas. I definitely think y'all should look it up, and that's another place where you can get involved. To kick off the Q&A portion of this, we have 3 questions that I cannot wait to get started and hear the answers about. The first one comes from Corinne. She said, Shevann talked about informing constituents of how different branches and levels of government work together and build each other up to address issues that are important to constituents. Can you speak to existing resources, printed website, hashtag that local advocates can use to continuously spread that information, even outside election season?
I don't know if that was specifically to me. I'm sure everybody has different resources as well. I will say for me specifically, I don't have anything specifically offhand. I've graduated communications degree, so I do a lot of research. So I have literally like folders on my computer with just like different things that I've compiled, different resources. And so what I would just say is kind of use what you've learned in school in terms of making sure it's reputable places, because it's not necessarily it's not necessarily the information, it's where you're getting it from and making sure it's credible. So in terms of hashtags, honestly, go ahead and go on Twitter. It'll tell you what's coming up, what's popular right now. As far as websites, I think to Tramonica's point, like use your local organizations as well. Those organizations probably have websites. Those organizations have resources as well. So almost how I was taught is basically when you do your research on anything, you have that main source that you're looking at, and they have a bibliography. That source has another bibliography. So use all those sources when you find a credible one to continue to find the rest of them. So that would be my best advice.
Would anybody else like to add to that?
Really quickly, okay. I was just going to say that the DFW Urban League Young Professionals has a voters hub. It's updated biannual with new information, but we have the 4 counties in North Texas and resources to find information. And basically what we do is just try to do a little research and find out which organizations are providing the answers to the things in specific communities. So one that I know off top is the League of Women Voters that does like a column on all the candidates running, and they ask all these questions and kind of publish them. But keep in mind that the people who exist on those board and who writes those questions aren't always people who look like us. So like Shevann said, no matter where you're reading this information from, make sure that you go back and kind of find your own answers and do more extensive research. But I know the League of Women Voters, the Dallas Examiner, and a few other organizations have resources they share out, but it's on you to validate those resources and make sure what's being published is truthful and that it's accurate.
To add to that right quick before we move on to the next question. Like I just mentioned, Black Women's Political Action Committee, they have taken upon themselves to highlight Black women who are on the ballot across the state of Texas. And they have provided this information on websites. They have their Instagram where they give these issues that concern women and these issues that concern these issues concerning these Black women candidates on their Instagram in like a really organized fashion. That was really inspiring. I also found that like most political action committees, when they endorse candidates and during election cycles, they do things like that as well. So that's also a good resource to use. But of course, sourcing is important, and we are not always represented in those areas. And Corinne, as a writer, maybe that's something you could do. That'd be really cool. Actually, that'd be actually really cool. The next question comes from Christian. He said, how does engagement change as we think of the complex demographies across, excuse me. How does engagement change as we think about the complex demographies of the state? What are some of the strategies to engage rural areas, for example?
I'll hop in on this one. While I'm not a native of Texas, I think that there are a lot of similarities between Georgia and Texas. We have 159 counties in Georgia. I don't even know how many y'all have in Texas. It's a lot more. However, there are some glaring similarities that I see. And to answer the 254, thank you, Sean, counties. That's a lot of counties. But one thing that we did in Georgia, at least in this runoff race, was we showed up in rural communities just as much as we showed up in Metro Atlanta. If you could win an election in Georgia just based off of Metro Atlanta, we would have done it a long time ago. If you could win an election in Texas just based off of Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and San Antonio, it would have been done a long time ago, right? So you have to run up margins, of course, activate as many voters as possible in your metropolitan areas, and then cut the margins in rural areas. And it doesn't involve just taking your campaign bus, having a car rally, and showing up one time. It involved going back to Valdosta, going back to Albany, going back to Brunswick, going back to Macon, over and over and over again while we could. And hopefully the Rev and John Ossoff continue to do that while they're in the United States Senate. There were so many times where people would come to me or come to other staffers when we showed up somewhere in Southeast Georgia where a Democratic candidate had never gone, and just said, thank you for coming. This is the first time a Democrat's ever come. Matter of fact, this is the first time that a candidate for office has ever come. And that says a lot about the Republican representation that we've had in Georgia for quite some time. But again, showing up over and over and over in these communities that happen to be disaffected and maybe disconnected, considering that they're rural, goes a long way in winning statewide elections. And again, showing up over and over and over again to speak to these constituencies helps win elections and makes your state overall a better place.
Sean, I know as a, if you wanted to add to that, because I know you have a lot of experience in that, and I know that we approached that problem this past election cycle, if you had anything to add.
Yeah, I think everything that Rick said is spot on. I think we have to show up in rural communities just as much as we show up in the other communities, but we have to be realistic. Like, one thing our coalition did is we organized also in East Texas. We know that East Texas has a strong population of Black people, but when it comes to representation, a lot of people who are not Black represent the area. And let's just, be real. The people who are voting in these rural communities who vote the way we vote are normally older. So when we target like our strategies, we have to specifically target young people. And a lot of young people feel that, young people, and I'm just being honest, if they're not seeing sometimes, and I'm not speaking generally, but what I've seen is that older people, more seasoned people would normally vote out of obligation, but young people, if they don't see a win, then, or people coming to speak to them, they'll say, my vote doesn't matter. We haven't had this kind of person in so long. We don't even have people speak to us. But just that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 touches that you make with those people can encourage them to vote, and that can make a shift, if not in their specific county, like in the nation, period. But I think it's a combination. It's not like, we're going to show up in these rural areas more and pull, extra 50,000 votes, because that's not how many people are there. Like, no matter how much you show up there, you're not going to get that many people from Tyler, from a small town. But being realistic and really looking at the data points, like in Dallas, I know we had a voter turnout of 65%, which was like the highest since the highest voter percentage since like Barack Obama, and then again with Bill Clinton. But what if we had a 80% voter turnout in Dallas County, Tarrant County, Harris County, that a lot of young people, a lot of progressive people live, and we really targeted those people who are disenfranchised, like the formerly incarcerated. We registered so many formerly incarcerated people who did not think that they were able to register. What if we collectively did that across the state, period? And we really targeted formerly incarcerated, younger voters, people who think their vote does not matter, and things of that nature, then we can have a true impact in the state. And I I truly believe that Texas is on its way to be a Georgia. We just have to do a better job in collectively working together and sharing. You know, we're so secretive on what we're doing and our strategies. We need to trust each other enough to be able to work alongside each other to really flip the state, because it's not going to be one group. It's not going to be one coalition. It's not going to be just the NAACP. It's not going to be just the Urban League. It's not just going to be these political PACs and things like that they do. It's going to be a collective effort amongst us all.
Can touch on that before you move
go ahead.
I want to add on to what Sean said when it comes to it's not just going to be one organization. I mean, we talk numbers all day, so it's not just going to be Black people. Like there's some of us, but to be honest, that's not the percentage. Like if you look at the census in 2010, obviously we're waiting on 2020, but we were less than 13% of the population in Texas. The biggest growing population in Texas is Hispanic and Latino people. They're literally at about 40%. And so when it comes to those organizations, we have to have some common ground. And as people of color, we have to realize how we can come together. We're going to have different cultures, different ideas, different needs, but we have to understand that there needs to be coalition building. So I can say even with Texas NAACP, a relationship that we built was Jolt. So we've been working with Jolt. We've had some events with them, and they are the largest Latino young organization in Texas. And so we have to continue to understand we have to help our people, like that is always our first priority. But in order to help our people, we also have to find other people. And we have to find other people who have similar goals as us. And that takes some time to come to the table and say, hey, you know, we want to meet with legislators, but before we walk into this room, can we agree point 1, 2, and 3, we're all on the same page. If you want to talk about point 4, 5, and 6 on a different time, that's perfectly fine. But point 1, 2, and 3 is what we're here for. And so I think that's what we also have to consider and how we build those relationships, because it won't just be our organizations that are represented on this call that are going to bring us to a different result.
And I agree wholeheartedly with all three of you said. I know this past election season, watching the votes come in, it was like sitting on edge. Everybody swore Texas was gonna go purple at the minimum, and I was so excited. So I think this day where we see, you know, unity from all of the demographics, when we see, you know, a flip in Texas like we saw in Georgia is coming soon. It's so close. So to the next question in the chat, I saw it earlier. My answer was yes, but I'm looking for it. Miss Dickinson, she asked, let me find it. I'm so sorry, guys.
Channing,
Okay,
I
she said,
see. Oh,
do you all agree that the foundations and nonprofits are well positioned to increase voter and civic participation and engagement within the communities in which they serve, and populations that are most likely to be overlooked by partisan campaigns? I understood that question to be, do you feel as if grassroots nonprofit organizations and foundations have more resources or have, you know, the capabilities to reach voters in our districts in ways that partisan campaigns don't and just do not?
I'll speak to that, especially with this last election. My answer is yes, just like yours. We were able to create a space where, I mean, we're grassroots, so we're used to starting from the ground. We're used to what I said before, meeting people where they are. So door knocking, going sitting at the check cashing place. I know it was several organizations that did that. We are able to connect with them on a level to where we're bringing it to them, and it makes them feel like their votes matter because people are not going outward bound. We're coming inside of urban or hood or however you want to put it, and we're reaching out to our people and saying, look, we can flip the script. We just need you to participate and let your voice matter. So my answer to that is absolutely.
Would anybody like to add to that?
I think,
Okay, then
sorry, the answer
go ahead.
obviously is generally yes. I think sometimes where we get in a pitfall, which I don't think it's any fault of our own, especially when it comes to Black organizations, is that everybody automatically assumes that we are aligned with the Democratic Party, even though our organizations are nonpartisan. And so I think with a lot of nonprofits and organizations, we continue to stress the nonpartisan. And sometimes I think that word doesn't mean anything to much people. And so I think once we frame it in a way that says, nonpartisan, what we're really saying is, I think we talked about it a lot in the last election. Like, I'm not voting blue or red, I'm voting for Black people, or I'm voting for what's right. And so I think a lot of it is just around framing, but positionally, we are doing a great job. It's just the narrative that we continue to portray and having to tear down those false narratives that are saying, oh, y'all just want us to vote for Democratic candidates, because that's not necessarily true. We want the best candidate, the candidate that's going to represent us, the candidate that's actually going to allow us to hold them accountable, or even the ones that we don't need to hold accountable because they actually do what they said they were going to during their race. But I don't know if we've gotten that far yet.
I see 100%. The next question is from Miss Elisa Simmons. She asked, what tactics did you learn from Georgia that young people can employ in Texas? Specifically, what did Stacey Abrams and team do to get young African Americans to the polls? How do you propose replicating in Texas? And I assume that's going to Rick.
Yeah, so what Leader Abrams in Georgia did, which was something that started well before I was able to organize on my own accord. So starting in about 2009, 2010, 2011, when she was elected, took over the Georgia House of Representatives as a Democratic leader, she initiated a movement of grassroots organizations stemming first in the greater Atlanta area, which was then expanded when she ran for governor in 2018. And out of that, you saw a groundswell of organizations such as Women of Color Coalition, later Fair Fight, founded by Stacey Abrams herself, organizations that were led by Black and Brown organizers that operated in their communities become outsized and operate around the state. That eventually culminated in helping Joe Biden win the state of Georgia in November. And then we were able to keep the state blue in winning the runoff races and control the Senate blue in January 5th of this year, when Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff won their respective races. In terms of the young people component of that, one thing that I'll say is, again, touching back to meeting people where they are, which has been one of the themes of this discussion that we've had, is that you have to speak to you have to speak to audiences where they are, as frank as I can be. Again, whether that involves using TikTok, whether it involves going to Twitter, whether it involves going door to door, whether it involves being on your college campus, at your student union, whatever it may be, you have to be where voters are. You have to speak to them and approach them for discussions. Because one thing I've realized is that if you don't reach out to every voter, if you don't reach out to everybody in your orbit, in your network, then they're not going to reach out to you. You as an activist have to take that upon yourself to do that. And in that, you have to have uncomfortable conversations. You have to tap into networks that you may not be familiar with and expand on that. And that's how, one vote becomes 3, that becomes 7, that becomes 8, 9, 10, and beyond. So that's one thing that I definitely think that we were able to do in Georgia successfully, and hopefully it continues going forward.
That is incredibly inspiring. Watching all these candidates on TikTok and on Twitter, especially when you see younger ones just taking Twitter fingers. Wow, it's been amazing. I think this is going to be our last question. If not, we may have time for 1 or 2 more, but you somewhat already answered it in the chat. I really just want to see if anybody else wants to add on to it. Andre asked, how can, essentially the same question, as a Morehouse alum, you talked about the political infrastructure and how that catapulted the state of Georgia into turning blue. He wants to know how that can be duplicated in the state of Texas. Just so everybody else hears, do you have anything else that you want to add to that? Any takers? All right. Then that means we have another question. Politicians are put in power by you and me, our vote. While it is a legislator's job to represent the people of their communities, it is our job to remind them of their accountability. How do you all feel that we can do this effectively? I'll take that one then.
It's good for Monica too.
Consistency. I think we've talked a lot about showing up and being consistent. I know that it's hard to make every school board meeting. It is exhausting to continuously have these same conversations, but each time we show up, we reach somebody new. Whether that's one person, whether that's two new people, we are often reminding the people that consistently show up that the work is not being done. In the NAACP, we're constantly getting people fired up and ready to work. I have taken that everywhere personally. But if you're not there consistently, if you're not keeping your foot on their neck, as Miss Tramonica said, if you're not showing up and making sure that when they're making a decision that you aren't in the back of their mind with, you know what, if I don't vote this way, I'm going to have to answer to my constituents, I'm going to have to answer to Kendyll, then they're not going to think of you when decision-making time comes. So showing up and being consistent is the easiest, most effective way to keep these elected officials accountable, other than voting. You have to vote. They cannot feel as if their seat is theirs to own for life and death. In Texas, we have a lot of politicians who have been lifetime seat holders. They were in office when I was 12, and sometimes they continue to represent the community in the way that we need them to, but we know that's oftentimes not true. They don't own the seat, the city, the people, the constituents. That's our seat for our representative, and we need to let them know that. And the easiest way to do that is voting. If anybody else has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I'll briefly just say that I think the easiest way to keep holding them accountable is to be informed. That you can't hold them accountable if you don't know what it is that you're talking about. So you should always be a student of life and be informed when be an informed constituent, because there's nothing worse than being and speaking about something you don't know all the details, and politicians are known for making you feel small, and they're like they're completely wrong. So you have to have, even in the midst of holding them accountable, you have to be right and have a spirit of determination so that they can't turn you around no matter what it is. So I think that's the biggest way to be effective in holding somebody accountable, because you can remind them all day long, but if you don't know exactly what it is, I'll use this for instance. I'm trying to get a moratorium on charter schools in the city of Dallas because of how they disproportionately affect Black and brown students in the southern sector. And a lot of the comments were about how privatization isn't the reason that Black and brown students aren't doing well. It's it's just the fact that they start off, that they don't have the best education or what have you, or that Dallas ISD prepares them poorly in elementary school. So when they come to the charter school at 7th and 8th grade, they're already bad. But the studies are showing that the students, that Dallas ISD is one of the top performing school districts in the state, not only in North Texas, but in the state. And the district is continuously going into a recapture phase because of the students that are leaving. So, you have those people, those politicians that will try to belittle you and talk back. I mean, not talk back, talk down on you when you try to hold them accountable. So if you're informed about if you know what you're talking about, there's nothing they can tell you, because you know what you're saying. So I think that's the best thing when it comes to accountability, especially from somebody from a youth, from a young person, because they're going to look at you like you don't know anything. I've had people tell me on a number of times, well, I have a PhD or an EDD, and I'm like, there's old fools that are educated everywhere.
Yeah.
I would also second to Traelon's point. I think, like he said, being informed and being educated is always the first step. You can't talk about something if you don't know about it. But I think the second step, which is always really hard for people, is actually doing the speaking up. It's really easy to say that you know something. I think of it, I have an 11-year-old brother. And so he'll often, like, if you ask him a question and he doesn't know the answer, you'll tell him the answer. He'll be like, oh, I knew that. Well, if you knew it, you would have said it. And so it's kind of that same understanding. You could ask, when I was at Baylor, my favorite thing, I'll write a letter, an email, have a flyer out in a heartbeat. As soon as I know it, you're gonna know it too. And so I think that is the second part. And then the third part is making sure you have actions to align with those. Everything doesn't have to be a protest. I'm gonna put that out there. But whether protesting is your next action, that's fine. If you're doing a Twitter storm, if you're doing an email blast, if you're putting together a petition, whatever it is, make sure that you have an action to go with those words. Because if you don't have any feet on the ground to match the words on the paper, you're just talking. So I think information, then speaking, and then making sure you have some actions to align with those. You might sometimes skip the speaking and go straight to the action, but making sure there's actual some follow through that goes with those.
Thank you all for all of those responses to those questions. And thank you to everybody who did ask a question. I know there are just a few other questions that were not. Sean, you had something you want to add?
I was gonna humbly and graciously ask for like 2 minutes because somebody asked me a question that, I just wanted to address really quickly.
Okay.
But you can say no. You got
No,
moderator
you're
privilege.
good.
Okay.
No, you're good.
Okay, so somebody asked me specifically like about the unsuccess and like flipping Texas. And then let me also say these opinions and these words aren't those of the organizations I represent, nor the Democratic Party. So I was employed with the Democratic Party, no longer employed, good 11 months and 3 quarters. But these are my own thoughts. And from what I've seen, like I really, and let me start by saying that I am a Democrat not because I agree 100% with the party or even 70%, but because what the party does for my people compared to the other party. I more identify as a progressive voter. And if there was a political system that had a chance in producing those progressive elected officials, I would more than likely, be a lot more aligned with them. So let me say that, and I think this experience was invaluable so I can really see the true problems within, the system. I think one of the best things we can do is educate ourselves and then infiltrate a system and then take it over and then start our own. So not saying that's what I did, but I'm just saying some words. But some of the problems that I saw are like, big problems in Texas and a lot of places in the South. And it's, voter suppression, it's voter disenfranchisement, it's lack of political education on all levels. Like, why don't we have a civics class that teaches this kind of stuff in the schools before people even, get 18? We have to plant seeds early, 7-minute countdown. So 1 minute for me. We have to plant seeds early so people at least have some level, some kind of touch. Like, we're not starting from scratch. We have so much work to do when trying to educate people like they've never heard of none of this stuff, because people in Austin have taken this right from us. And the largest thing that I've seen, and I'll tell you, is I think it comes down to money and resources. And there was a lot of money invested into the races in Texas, but how was it invested? Where did that money go? And being on the inside, that money, it didn't trickle down to grassroots organizations. It didn't trickle down to organizations really doing the work, or consultants who are even from Texas or the communities that they're consulting on. It trickled down to a lot of people who have a quote unquote name for themselves, or who have worked a Biden campaign or a different campaign in different areas, and they don't specifically know the communities that they're talking about. And let me tell you something, Texas is very different from it's different from a lot of states, and then the culture of Dallas is different from a lot of cities, and so is Tarrant County as well. But I think that money did not go where it needed to go. And I think as Black people, We need to do a better job in raising our own money and, you know, really building political power by funding things ourselves, but also getting money from organizations that are getting all this money. Like, you know, you have a Communities Foundation, you have all these organizations that get grants and dollars and things from, you know, DC to do work, and they're not doing it right. You know, all these, what do you call those? All these polls, these inaccurate pollings and things of that nature. Like, I think the biggest failure of the work in Texas is not grassroots organizing, but it's investing in grassroots organizers. So until we fully invest in grassroots organizations, we won't see the result. We can build this collective power and get things together and get things ready, but how far of a reach will we really have, you know, if we have $10,000 compared to like 500,000? And it's a lot more than that. I can tell you, like, for 3 key races in Texas, congressional district 24, 32, like, there was some money thrown into those races and those state seats, those state races, and they just didn't go where they needed to go to have the biggest and the most impact.
And I'll just say that that was a great segue to us closing, because Sean, I mean, although that is your opinion, I completely agree with you. And I think that also brings up a point that Miss Alyssa Simmons that she brought up in the chat. You know, when you find a candidate that resonates with you, their platform and their campaign, or just grassroots organizations in general, if you have those extra funds available, donate, because it all helps. I mean, of course, sometimes you may, you know, look and say, oh, well, they're getting X amount of dollars from this organization or from the party that, you know, they identify themselves with. But, you know, I can just say, working on campaigns myself, both locally and statewide, and I think everybody on this call have probably worked on numerous campaigns as well. We know that those funds aren't always given to the candidates and their campaigns directly to make the impact that they need. And so I'll just leave it at that. I just first want to say thank you to all of the panelists that accepted my invitation, because of course I know this is probably a busy time for you all, especially, you know, Rick, you coming off of a busy time in Georgia, especially with the runoff. So I appreciate each of you for accepting my invitation. I want to say thank you to Channing Hill for coming on and helping me, you know, in the final stretch of planning this event, and then moderating our Q&A. Sean, you were an integral part coming on, and just helping us, you know, map out and helping me map out, you know, the program, and put it in a strategic manner to, you know, make sure that it was going to be a good program for everyone. I know that she has her camera off, but I just want to say a big thank you to her, because originally when I was thinking about doing this event back in October, I reached out to her. We talked about it. She was, you know, instantly down, and so she helped me, you know, really craft this event to be what it is. So I appreciate her and her support in all of my endeavors. Just some final remarks that I just want to share with you guys is, remember that, you know, we can't do this alone. The work that we're doing, you know, politically, the work that we're doing, when it comes to advocacy, whatever it may be, you know, we cannot do the work alone. So find someone, and it doesn't have to be a campaign. It does not have to be an organization. It could be one of your friends. It could be someone that, you know, you go to school with, a colleague. Find someone that shares some of those same beliefs and those ideals with you, and partner with them, because, you know, of course, there's only so much that you can do as an individual, but we have to have other people that we can build those coalitions with, like Shevann mentioned, to really push forward our agendas. Also, just remember that, you know, let's not be reactionary, but let's be effective and strategic, in everything that we do. And let's make sure that we're staying consistent with everything. You know, you have to realize it. Are you doing something just for, you know, the time being, just to be reactionary to a particular issue, or are you doing this because you actually want to make change in your community? So definitely realize that. And lastly, tap in with organization. I know some of you may have reservations on the call about joining a particular organization, for whatever reasons, but in order to do the work, you have to be a part of an organization. It doesn't have to be a national organization such as NAACP, Urban League, but join an organization, whether that's grassroots, whether that's something that you're coming together with a few friends to start. Join an organization. Let's not replicate the work. Let's be strategic in everything that we're doing and making sure that we're able to effectively push our agenda in a way that's going to be beneficial for not just our own community, but the communities all across our state and across the country. Lastly, I just want to recognize, of course, the partners that helped us as far as promotion, of course, DFW Urban League, the NAACP Arlington chapter, Fort Worth Tarrant County branch, as well as the Texas Youth and College Division. In addition, just recognizing the two elected officials that I did see on the call, Fort Worth City Council members Gina Bivens and Kelly Allen Gray. I think that is a testament to them as elected officials because they want to engage with us in this work and learn more about our thoughts when it comes to civic engagement. Other than that, this is the conclusion of the program. I appreciate you guys for joining in on us. There's definitely more information to come, so definitely look forward to some emails from me. There will be a survey that I'll be going out, and I'll appreciate it if you guys can complete that just so we can, and I can think about some future programming. And other than that, I will make sure to share all of the panelists' information. And I appreciate you guys for being here. Let's go out, let's be strategic, and let's do the work. Thank you for joining.